Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming my June wrap-up. And I don't know why, but June felt like the longest month of the year so far for me. Like, June feels like it's been a lifetime, and I feel like that's just because I've been doing so many things in June, and I can't believe some of the stuff I did at the beginning of the month was still within this month. I got my hair cut this month. I started an ASMR channel this month, and I've posted about like 7 or 8 videos now. I was in a reading slump. I got out of a reading slump. I listened to so many audiobooks. I also started to do a book shopping series on my channel with my mom, and we went to Oak Harbor and La Conner in Seattle. There's just been a lot of things going on for me in the month of June, and I'm stoked with how many books I was able to read in the month of June because I read 14 books this month, which might be the most books I've read in a month so far this year. I'll have to double check. I also did want to mention that I had one DNF this month. I started listening to the audiobook for Animal by Lisa Taddeo, and this is one that I was really excited about because Emma Roberts narrates the audiobook, and so I was really really excited to listen to it just for that reason alone, but I only got like about 30% into it before I got really bored and it felt like nothing was happening, and it was just kind of like a day in the life of this woman kind of story. It was just very slow and I just didn't really care, so I decided to DNF it. But I love Emma Roberts' voice and I wish she would narrate more audiobooks. But anyways, out of the 14 books that I did finish this month, I had 4 5-star books, 5 4-star books, 2 3-star books, and 3 2-star books. So it was mostly on the higher end this month, which is great. And then as far as genres go, I read 3 romances this month, 4 thrillers, 3 sci-fi books, 1 horror book, 1 young adult contemporary, and then 2 books that were kind of like literary fiction, contemporary, historical, like I don't really know how to describe them. The very first book that I finished in the month of June is Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. And this book surprised the hell out of me because this is a thriller that I was hearing a lot of really great things from my friends about. Like everybody was telling me to check this book out. But previously I had read a book from this author that was like a 1 or 2-star book, and so I was ready to like swear off this author completely because I just felt like maybe she wouldn't be for me. But this book was so freaking good. It was a 5-star thriller, one of my favorites of the year so far. I do feel like it's best to just go into this book not knowing anything like I did about it, because the first 50 pages of this book are really shocking and it grips you right away and you're like, what the fuck is going on? But if you have to know general premise, this book is just about this small town where these women keep going missing. And so there's like a woman in the small town that goes missing, and then 10 days later or so, a woman and her child also go missing. And I just thought this was so well written. I will say there's quite a bit of characters to follow in this, so you might want to take notes of like who is who and who you're following and stuff like that. But I had the most fun reading this book. I thought it was so freaking good, and the plot twists were actually good and I didn't see them coming. And so yeah, this was 5 stars for me. I loved it. The next book I read this month is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is another book that surprised the hell out of me. Like, I don't know why, because it was one of my most anticipated books of the year because I loved The Martian. I felt so about Artemis, but I was really looking forward to this one, and this one did not disappoint whatsoever. I think I enjoyed this book even more than The Martian. This one is like this action-packed, fun sci-fi novel that follows this guy named Ryland. He wakes up in outer space on a spaceship and all of his crewmates are dead, and when he wakes up, he doesn't even remember his own name. He has no idea where he is, who these people are, like he has no memories. And we just kind of follow him on this journey as he tries to navigate like what the fuck happened. Like he tries to figure out, like unlock some of his own memories of his past and like figure out what happened. So there's like this fun mystery element involved to this book. There's so much sci-fi, like to the point where some of it kind of went over my head, like I will admit. Like the sci-fi wasn't my favorite, even though I do love the discussion of outer space and trying to find life outside of our own planet. Like that's one of my favorite things because I love astronomy. But also this book was just so much fun. It was so genuinely funny. Like there were moments in this book where I actually laughed out loud, and that never really happens for me reading books physically. And this book has one of the softest, like most adorable things in this book that I can't spoil anything for you because it's literally all spoilers, but like I just loved it so much. I was so surprised by where this book ended up going. I just didn't expect it to go in that direction, and it fucking warmed my entire soul. The next book I read this month was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which this was probably my most anticipated book of the year. So I'm kind of sad to say that I didn't love this the way that I was expecting to. Taylor Jenkins Reid is my favorite author, so this is a story that I was really excited about because we're following these 4 siblings who are the children of Mick Riva, who was one of the husbands in the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So I just thought it was like a really cool way to connect it to that universe, and I was really excited to follow these 4 siblings in the 80s in Malibu. It all takes place on one day during this giant party that they're going to be having in Malibu in the 80s. And so the story's kind of told with the present day is the day of the party, and then we kind of get flashbacks to their childhood and everything. And I don't know, there was just something about this book, I just didn't connect with it the way that I wanted to. I found most of it to be kind of just slow and boring. I really did love the characters Nina and Kit. They were my favorite 2 characters in this book for sure. And I do love stories that follow sibling relationships. It kind of reminded me of like Little Fires Everywhere a little bit and Shameless. I did love the Malibu scenery as well because I'm from California. It really did a great job of like bringing that like beachy lifestyle. Like it just made me miss California reading this. I also like, I don't know what it was, I just didn't really connect as much with these characters in the story. I guess I just didn't care the way that I was expecting to. And I did think the party scenes got kind of like tedious and kind of boring, and I didn't like the like random point of views during some of the party scenes towards the end. It was like, it was just trying to show you like different people at the party, and I just like didn't really care. But still, at the end of the day, I just feel very underwhelmed by this book in general, and I'm still having trouble even remembering certain things about this book now, and it's been less than a month since I read it. So overall, I feel like I'm giving this somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 star. Like I still enjoyed this book very much, but it just didn't live up to my high expectations that I had for it, and for that reason, I'm sad. And then another book that didn't really live up to my expectations is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This is one that I was really excited about because it's a female-female romance. And I was really excited by this concept in this book because one of the girls is basically like stuck on this subway, and she thinks that she's still living in like the 1970s or something. And I think this book was a really interesting concept, but I think the execution of it just wasn't done very well. And as adorable as these 2 girls are, I just didn't feel their chemistry very much. Like I felt like their connection was very like insta-lovey, and I just didn't love this book the way that I thought I would. So this one ended up being like around a 3.5 stars for me as well. This book just doesn't slap as hard as Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like Red, White, and Royal Blue just like fucking hits. And then the 5th book that I read this month is She Drives Me Crazy. This one is another queer female-female romance that I was so stoked to be reading all of these during Pride Month because I got this one checked out in time from my library. And this one's like a young adult book, and it includes some of my favorite tropes like fake dating and like kind of like a hate to love or like enemies to lovers kind of thing going on. I don't know, I just thought it was so cute, and it was mostly lighthearted, but it also had some really good like serious discussions about like grief after a breakup, and I just thought that that was really interesting and really like real and raw to talk about. Overall, I give this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really cute. It's one of the best like young adult romances that I've read in quite some time. And then the 6th book that I read this month is Switch by A.S. King. This is another audiobook that I listened to from my library. I really enjoyed Dig when I just read it, and so I wanted to check out more A.S. King, and this one sounded really interesting because it's kind of like a sci-fi-ish novel that's about how time comes to a stop. And then everything just continues to go on, but time has come to a stop. And this book was just confusing as fuck to me. And I feel like it might not even be the book, it might just be me, because I feel like I'm too dumb to understand this book. Like, I just don't understand what the fuck happened in this book, and I don't even understand like how time came to a stop, but then everything kept going on, because I'm like, then time didn't stop. I don't know, like I said, I'm too dumb to understand this, so I ended up giving it 2 stars, but it's also because I just didn't really care about the characters. I just didn't really enjoy this the way that I wanted to. The 7th book that I read this month was What Comes After, and this is one that I read physically, and I also listened to this on audio. I just ended up getting the audiobook from Libro because one of my favorite male narrators was on this audiobook, so I really wanted to read it because of that. And this audiobook is really great too because it had 2 male narrators on it and 1 female narrator, so it kind of felt like a bigger cast on the audiobook, which was nice. And this book is really intense. Like, this book has a prologue that just grips you right away and makes you feel like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? And this is a book where I don't even know if I would describe this as more, you know, like literary fiction or like mystery thriller vibes or like contemporary fiction. Like, I don't really know how I would describe this because some of this book is so hard-hitting. It makes it feel like it's more like literary contemporary fiction, but then the way this book starts and the way this book ends feels very like mystery thriller to me. It's really interesting though because in the first chapter we find out these 2 boys that are in high school both went missing. And then it says on the morning of the 8th day that they went missing, Daniel's childhood friend Jonah was found dead. In a suicide note, he confessed to Daniel's murder. Then it says Daniel was found then, his body slashed to pieces. And the freaking first chapter is only like 2 pages long, but it just kind of like makes you intrigued right away, like what the fuck happened between these two teenage boys and like what is going on. I don't know, I was just really intrigued by this book. I really enjoyed the characters in this book, especially the young 16-year-old girl who was pregnant. She was definitely my favorite character to read about in this book just because I found her to be really intriguing and kind of mysterious. But yeah, I had a great time reading this book. I thought it was really well done. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then the next book that I read this month was The Other Black Girl, and this one was actually the booktube book club pick for the month of June. And I had a really great discussion with my friend Jessie chatting about this book, so if you missed a live show, I will link it down below in the description. But I highly encourage you to watch that if you did read the book with us and you didn't get a chance to join in the live show. I would still recommend watching it because I feel like I learned so much from them and their perspective on this book. This book was so interesting, and I feel like it was such a great pick for the book club because there were so many interesting things to discuss about it. And if you didn't get the chance to read it and you don't know what it's about, it follows this girl named Nella who works at a book publisher. For a long time, she's been the only black girl that's worked at this book publisher, but then they hire this girl named Hazel, who's this other black girl. And then Nella starts getting these strange notes that's like, leave Wagner now, and like kind of like threats and different things like that, and she doesn't know what to do about it. There's so much important discussion about race in this book, but it's also just like genuinely creepy, and I really love the atmosphere in like the first like 200 pages or so of this book. I just thought it was done so well. I will say the ending of this book lost me a little bit. Like, I didn't love the direction it went into at the end. The plot twist is absolutely wild, and I really appreciate what this author was trying to do. Yeah, overall I'm gonna give this book 4 stars, I think, but if you would like more of my thoughts and more of Jessie's thoughts, then I will link the live show down below. The next book that I picked up this month is The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. This is actually an ARC that was sent to me from Penguin Random House. This one goes on sale July 20th, and this one is a horror novel. I was really hesitant and nervous to pick this book up because I was not a huge fan of this author's previous book, Wanderers, that he came out with last year. This book follows this couple, Nathan and Maddie, and they both have had kind of very traumatic childhoods. Nathan was abused by his father pretty horrifically, and his father has recently passed away and has left him his childhood home behind. And so now Nathan and Maddie and their son Oliver are going to be moving into this house where Nathan used to be abused as a child, and this house is spooky and freaky and nothing can be trusted. It's an amazing haunted house story, but it's also so much more than that, and this story will go in a direction that you just will not expect. And even though this book is like over 500 pages, like just a little bit over 500 pages, oh my gosh, it's just so immersive and it's so engaging, and you will be flipping those pages. Like, I'm pretty sure I finished this 500 page book within like 2 or 3 days, and I'm just obsessed with where this book went. This book is horror, but it's also another genre. Like, it kind of leans more into another genre as well that I don't really want to spoil for you because I was kind of surprised by where it went and I wasn't expecting it. So freaking good. It's also interesting because in the prologue of this book we follow this serial killer who got like put to death a really long time ago in the past, and his story kind of has to do with like what's going on in the town as well. Like, there's also this other story going on, so you're not just following the family in the haunted house. There's also like so much more of a story happening here. There's a scene in this book that takes place on Halloween night, and like some of those scenes are just grilled into my brain. They were so creepy and so well done. My only critique of this book is that I don't love the last like 100 pages of this book. I thought the last 100 pages were pretty underwhelming, but because this book is over 500 pages, I still would highly recommend this, and I'm still giving this like a 4.5 to 5 stars just because even though the ending of this book was a little bit underwhelming, I had such a great time with the first like 450 pages or so that I still want to recommend this, and I still loved it so much. I mean, I pretty much feel the same about this as I did with, you know, Imaginary Friend. Like, even though the ending was a little underwhelming, it's still one of my favorite horror books that I've ever read, you know? The next book that I read was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, and this one I only got the chance to read this month because I downloaded the audiobook from my library. I put this on hold a while ago and it finally came through. And this book is described as like a thriller mystery novel. It's about this woman who her husband goes missing. He leaves behind a note that's like, take care of her. And it's about his daughter, and so she's kind of like gonna be taking on the role of this girl's mother. For me, this book didn't really read like much of a thriller. I mean, it was more of a mystery, but also like not very intense and not very thrillery at all. It was just kind of like this mystery, contemporary feeling book. I don't know if it was just me and like I wasn't really in the mood for something like this, but I just didn't really enjoy this one. I couldn't really connect with the characters. I mean, I liked the main protagonist enough, but I just didn't care enough about her to really care about the story. Honestly, like I didn't know this man well enough to like care where he had gone or like what he's doing. Like I just didn't really care about the characters at all. So I ended up giving this one 2 stars. This book I read was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and this was actually my 3rd time reading this book, but I wanted to reread it because this fall there's a sequel coming out for Aristotle and Dante, so I wanted kind of like a refresher because it's been a couple of years since I've read this book, and I was able to download this audiobook from my library, and I didn't realize that Lin-Manuel Miranda narrates this audiobook, so I was really excited to give it a listen, and I just really enjoyed this book again. I mean, this is one of my all-time favorite books, like you already know. I'm always gushing about this book because it's just everything, and it's really cool because I never realized that every time that I've read this book, it's always been in June, which is just so cool because this book is like the perfect summery book. It's like the perfect start to summer for me, and their families, like they're both Mexican in this book, and their families just remind me so much of my family from California, and this book just makes me feel right at home, honestly. Like I just love it so much. I relate to Aristotle so much. I could go on all day, but I fucking love Aristotle and Dante. This is easily 5-star, one of my favorite books of all time. And then next up I read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for years. I mean, it was a book of the month selection in October of 2018. I was able to get the audiobook checked out from my library, so I just ended up listening to it on audio. I don't know if it's because it's like young adult and it was just like, it just felt kind of cringy to me. Like I just didn't love it the way that I wanted to. And I think even though I do enjoy reading stories about like famous people, I think I learned something about my reading taste reading this book is that I don't really like reading about people who get viral famous off the internet. When I talk about I like reading about famous people, I guess I'm talking about more like actors or musicians or directors or like people, mostly people in the film industry, honestly, but I really don't like reading about people who get famous off the internet and people that go viral online. Like I don't know why, it just like grinds my gears and it just annoys me. And even though there are some aspects of this book that I enjoyed, you know, because it is kind of like more sci-fi, the whole story is about this young teenage girl going viral because she's the first one to discover this random statue that they think came from aliens or something, because there's no explanation for how it can exist. And I think the idea of this book is really cool. I gave this 2 stars. And then the next book that I read was My Sister the Serial Killer, and you guessed it, I also listened to this on audio. I'm telling you, like everything that I read this month was because of audiobooks. And this is one that I was so excited to read because I actually just purchased this book from a used bookstore in Seattle, like right at the end of the month. So as soon as I bought it, I looked to see if my library had the audiobook available, and they did. So I just downloaded it, listened to it all within like 1 day because it's such a short audiobook and such a short book. This one is a young adult thriller, and it's about this girl who her sister is a serial killer and she can't be trusted. And this book was really interesting. I don't know though if I would personally categorize this as a thriller because it's more like slow moving, and I do feel like because it's the sister that's the serial killer and not the main character, I feel like a lot of the action of this book happens off the page, so it's kind of like you just kind of get to see what happens after certain murders have happened or things like that. Like it's not very suspenseful in the writing, but there was also some really great moments in this book, and I really liked the conversation our main character has with like some of the people in this book. Like it was just really interesting, and I can see why a lot of people really love this book. I was just expecting a little bit more from it because it got so hyped for me. So I think I'm gonna end up giving this like somewhere between a 3 and 3.5 stars. Like I really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't as thrilling as I expected it to be. And then the last book that I read in the month of June was Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bellafleur. And this is one that I just recently bought in Seattle, and I didn't even realize when I bought it in Seattle that it takes place in Seattle. And this book is technically the sequel to Written in the Stars, which is a female romance that I read in December last year that I absolutely fucking loved. And this book is the sequel to that book because we followed Darcy's brother from the first book. We followed Darcy's brother and this girl Annie. This book was just, oh my god, it was everything. This book might be my favorite romance of 2021 that I've read so far. I just absolutely adored Brendan and Annie. Annie's character is bisexual, and so that's really exciting because I do want to read more bisexual representation, but also because I really enjoy reading bisexual representation where the character ends up with someone of the opposite sex, just because I feel like that's so rare to read about when you read about bisexual characters. But God, this book was just everything. It was so cute, and it was so cool to read this book because I had just gone to Seattle like the day before I read this, and so it was really cool because in this book these characters like go to Pike Place, you know, and they go to the Gum Wall, and they go to all of these places that I had just visited myself like a day ago. So it was just really cool. Like I felt like I was right there. I also really love that one of these characters is from California and they moved to Washington because that is like my exact situation. So I just really connected with that, and like they were talking about like In-N-Out versus Dick's, and like that's conversations that I have with like my friends because I'm from California and In-N-Out is like my fucking number one. Dude, this romance was just so cute. It was so perfect and steamy, but I also like love Brendan's character. Like I love that he's like a huge fan of romance movies and like big romantic gestures, but I also really related to Annie and her like insecurities and her not wanting to give up her freedom for a relationship. Like I just found her to be really relatable as well. My God, I loved it. I want to reread this soon. Like I just loved it so fucking much. So this was easily a 5-star book for me. One of my favorite romances of the year, if not my favorite romance of 2021 so far. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. It was quite a lot, but I'm very stoked to have read so many books this month. I've listened to so many audiobooks, and I found so many new favorite books. Like even though I was disappointed by some of my most anticipated books of the year, I'm so excited to have found some really great books and books that I wasn't really anticipating being new favorites. So yeah, it was a great reading month. Let me know, what did you read in the month of June? What was the best book that you read in the month of June? What was the worst book that you read in the month of June? And yeah, thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye!